Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Allincrypto podcast. I am your host, Allincrypto, and today I am absolutely delighted to be joined once again by Brandon the HBARBULL. The first place for me to start is by asking you how you are, Brandon.
I'm good. I mean, right now, the crypto space is getting that much more exciting because of a bunch of different reasons. I'm sure we're going to dive into it, but I'm having a blast covering the entire space, and I'm sure you are too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said this before, I'm going to continue to say it. When it comes to HBAR, Hedera, its ecosystem, and everything that's kind of going on with it, I find your videos nothing short of informative. They're my kind of go-to in regards to staying up to date on Hedera Hashgraph and its ecosystem. So a massive thank you on behalf of myself and the other people out there that, you keep informed. You really are doing God's work when it comes to Hedera, I think.
Well, I have to give the credit to, all the great guests that I have on and the questions I get from the community. And of course, the Hedera ecosystem as a whole. It gives us so many great things to cover. So it's fun. It's been fun to this point.
Yeah, there's never our job, I guess, is kind of easy as people that have to report on the crypto space because there's just that much going on. There's never nothing to talk about. And I'm sure we're going to get into some of the things to talk about as it relates to Hedera during the course of this interview. So maybe let's just start. Everyone's on a kind of different journey in regards to the crypto space. Some people have been here for years. Some people have just found it. And for the people that perhaps are new to Hedera Hashgraph and what it is, what it kind of does, maybe I could ask you to give us a bit of an overview in regards to HBAR, Hedera, what it is, and perhaps what it's trying to do. Quite a broad question, but just a kind of summary, if you will.
It is broad. Now, Hedera is a layer one. So you can think of it, like Ethereum or Solana or Avalanche. It can do all kinds of things for all kinds of different industries. It's a unique concept. It's not a blockchain. It's a hash graph, which is a DAG. I'm sure people have heard that out there. But it has a lot of unique attributes that make it near or best in class in all kinds of things that we use to measure these different networks. Throughput right now, it's throttled down to 10,000 transactions per second, but it can handle many tens of thousands of transactions per second per shard, and then it's already designed to be sharded. So essentially, it could scale to an unlimited capacity as far as throughput. It's time to consensus finality, so how fast it can process transactions. The time for it to get to finality is down just over 3.4. I think it's 3.4 seconds right now, and that's actually come down as the network has expanded. So that's pretty impressive. It's one of the only networks that I know that has met the gold standard as far as security. You'll hear a Byzantine fault tolerance, ABFT, when you're talking about Hedera. Just across the board, it has all these attributes that you kind of look for when you want to build something that can scale. It's fit for purpose. You'll hear Hedera talked about as the enterprise chain, but that's kind of misleading. What I think the goal is to meet the needs of mission critical enterprise applications. And if they can do that, they can meet the needs of essentially anybody who's building an application on the network. And to do that, they have several different services. They have the Hedera consensus service. So that is a little bit confusing at times. People are like, well, all the transactions you're doing are this consensus service, so you're just trying to reach consensus. That's not the case. You can think of the consensus as an online data logging service or an online notary. It's just tracking data. We also have a smart contract service. We have the cryptocurrency service. We have a token service, so you don't have to have smart contracts to build on Hedera. And this allows you, no matter what, if you're building things with smart contracts, that's not going to be as efficient as building on the native layer. So if you're actually building on the native layer, you can get all the great stuff of that really high throughput, that really fast speed, all that kind of stuff. And it makes it really easy to create these tokens on Hedera. So easy that some of our wallet providers allow you to create your own tokens inside the wallet. So it's really incredible, some of the tools that are being created with that. And then you don't have to worry about smart contract security risks. So going through a smart contract audit or something along those lines. So, those are all the tools in kind of the broad outline. The last thing that I want to touch on is the governance. A lot of times governance is an afterthought with these networks. And that was one of the things that they wanted to solve with Hedera. They wanted, again, those enterprises that are building these mission critical applications, they have a lot of expertise, right? And they wanted to have them governing the network, not just some random group of strangers that you have no idea who they are. They wanted them to have skin in the game as far as the brands that they need to protect. So Hedera has a governing council of blue chip companies and organizations throughout the world. We're talking about Google and IBM and Dell, Deutsche Telekom. Go on down the line. Right now, we have 32 governing council members that are just as impressive as the ones I just mentioned. And we're going on our way to 39. And a lot of people say that this is actually the secret sauce of Hedera, even though the technology is really impressive, that's just as important. So I would certainly, for your audience, go check out the governing council. They have some really impressive stuff going on.
Yeah, it's I think the word that you used, fit for purpose or ready for use, is kind of really the correct one. I think the first place I kind of started with Hedera was looking into the technology and kind of understanding what a DAG is, understanding what it allows this distributed ledger to do. It's not a blockchain. I probably still call it a blockchain all the time just because I'm so used to calling everything a blockchain, but it utilizes a DAG, the hash graph more specifically. But when you think about what we're trying to do here with these kind of layer ones, we're trying to basically onboard Web 2 and the kind of broader world, billions of people. And actually a blockchain needs to be able to do that. And what we've seen, quite frankly, is that most layer ones haven't. And I think that's something that really separated Hedera from the pack for me, is just the capabilities that it has. Then you mentioned the governing council. When we talk about institutional adoption, I mean, there's 32 governing council members. Some of those governing council members are the largest companies in the world, all with their own expertise. It's a complete package. And it's why we love having people like yourself on the show to talk to us about this kind of stuff, because you just kind of want to get it out there. You want everybody to know about actually what's going on with Hedera, because it's just so impressive. What kind of a role, sort of extending on that, what kind of a role do you think Hedera is going to play? If you were to say in 10 years time, perhaps, what kind of a role do you think Hedera is going to play in that world if it's successful? Of course, there's a big if there. I mean, it's very well positioned, probably one of the most best positioned. But what kind of a role do you see Hedera playing in the world we're moving towards, 10 years or so, or perhaps beyond?
This is a great question. So there's a lot of exponential technologies that are coming into place right now that are going to have the potential to make the next 10 years so much more prosperous for everyone on Earth. One of those exponential technologies, it's DLT technology, is crypto. But there's, of course, AI and robotics and, autonomous vehicles. And you can just go down the line of all the amazing things. But every one of these other industries that are being created, that are starting to launch now, can use Hedera. So IoT, Internet of Things, is a great discussion topic on that. But the issue with Internet of Things is payments, right? So if you have all these things that are autonomously going around and doing these amazing things that we're getting excited about, you have to have a form of payments, and it can't be something like on the traditional rails. PayPal is taking 50% if you have a $1 payment. So that's just not feasible. But if you have it at 1/10 of a cent or 1/100th of a cent on something like Hedera, it makes it much more feasible. Something like AI, it dovetails perfectly into crypto. One of the biggest issues around AI right now is IP, right? People own all of the data that's out there that these AI things are using to create whatever it may be. The only issue with that, you can't just take that IP. You can't take the things that others have created and just use it, or you shouldn't be able to. You have to compensate them somehow. And once again, payments is perfect for that. Data logging, as I mentioned, is going to be huge for personal identity and things like that. So you can just go down the line and look at all these things that are being built. We talked about autonomous vehicles. That's going to be critical again for payments. So, I mean, you just go down the line of all these exponential technologies, and you can see touch points where crypto and DLT technology is going to be important. And to do that, having a network that has the capability of handling essentially unlimited throughput is essential. You have to be able to do that. And Hedera's, again, I think we're going to talk about theoretical or claimed capabilities and what you're actually going to see in practice. And that's what Hedera has already kind of proved to a certain point. Right now, Hedera is processing about 16 or 1,300 transactions per second, but we've seen that on a sustained basis going well over 3,000 transactions per second, with spikes over 10,000 transactions per second. There's no other network that has been able to maintain those levels in practice. They may claim whatever they want, and I think as time goes on, Hedera in practice is going to prove that it can handle these really high volume use cases where some of the other networks might struggle once they start to get really pushed by the applications that are going to be coming to market in the years to come.
Yeah, in order for this to be kind of a technological revolution, it's actually got to revolutionize something. And if you've built a distributed system that can't handle, the kind of volume that, let's say, Visa can handle, I mean, and it's more expensive to do that, it kind of begs the question, what really are you doing? And I think, and we touched on this off camera a little bit, it's really amazing just how crypto finds itself as a kind of missing piece to many different puzzles. You mentioned the Internet of Things. Finance, for example, is probably the most prominent case of it right now. You've got things like AI, you've got things like identity. The application for a distributed ledger is really endless. And it seems to kind of be fitting so well into many different industries. And in order for it to do that, it needs to be scalable. It needs to be able to deal with these. It needs to have an assurance. I don't think, when we look at, let's pick on Solana a little bit here, they've got some great things going on, but they might say they have the scalability, but what use is that scalability if it goes down consistently? I don't think Hedera's really got that problem. It's a full kind of package, if you will, not to throw any shade on Solana or its community, just to highlight, if you're going to be running critical infrastructure, it has to be on a blockchain that works. It also has to be on a blockchain that's affordable. Could you maybe touch a little bit on the fee structure in regards to Hedera? How do the fees work?
Well, that's one of the things when you talk about the expertise of the governing council, they make just good business decisions. So the fees are paid in HBAR for Hedera for all the different API calls you can make for all the services that I mentioned before, but they're priced in dollars. You're going to have a hard time going to a CFO and saying, we want to build this application on this DLT network, but the cost, we have no idea, because this cryptocurrency that we're paying it in could go up by 10x. It could drop by, 90%. We have no idea what it's going to cost. They're going to look at you like you're crazy. So what Hedera has done is they mark to market where the HBAR is on a regular basis, and all of those fees are paid again in HBAR, but marked to market in dollars. So if you're going to use the Hedera consensus service, that's 1/100th of a penny for each one of those calls. And if you're going to be doing 1 million transactions per day, what's that's going to cost. For the HTS, if you're transferring a token that you've created, that's going to be 1/10 of a cent. And of course, the governing council is going to adjust those depending on market demands. But it's just a good business decision that they made from the beginning. And I think that's going to continue over time because they just know how to run business on that governing council level.
Yeah, it seems like a consistent theme with Hedera, which is just such a well thought out project. I mean, they've literally thought about everything, right? If you wanted, let's say you wanted to do something on Ethereum, you want to utilize Ethereum, it's almost impossible to run a business on Ethereum due to the fees. I think just the other day to do a swap, it was something like $116 on Ethereum. That is simply unworkable. And we know they have layer twos and things like this. But Hedera is kind of, you don't need to have a layer two to address really anything. There's every kind of aspect of Hedera has been well thought out. And this is what kind of initially I think attracted me to Hedera, was just how well thought out it is, how sort of optimal the technology is, and how well positioned it is to kind of gain adoption with the broader world. I listened to Lehman talk about how he kind of wants to be a Trojan horse in regards to Web 2. He doesn't want to kind of take people out their comfort zones. He wants to make this really easy for people to do. And I think things like the fee structure, I think things like how you actually can create a token and kind of onboard into Hedera. I know the wallets are doing some pretty impressive things in regards to making it easy for people to actually create a wallet without, perhaps having to self-custody. You've got things like DREC. The whole project's just amazing. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that before we maybe talk about institutional adoption of Hedera.
No, you're right. I mean, the tools and infrastructure that's being built just makes things a lot easier. We have teams like Hashback, that's a wallet provider. Their tools are amazing. We have teams like Kabila and Hgraph.io. We have, you can go down the line. We have a lot of infrastructure providers that are doing some really impressive things, just making it even easier, even though the services that I talked about are very easy. But you're right. At a higher level, they're looking at the problems of DLT in general, and they're saying, you can't not be able to recover things if you lose your wallet or your recovery phrase gets burned up in a fire or something along those lines. There needs to be ways to address that. And Lehman, the inventor of Hashgraph and one of the founders of Hedera, created this DREC platform that allows you to do that in a decentralized way. And it's not just Hedera. They've created this DREC alliance, and I know the first team that has jumped on with Hedera with that is Algorand, another platform that I'm a big fan of. I think they're doing a lot of good work. But he was having a conversation with Brad Garlinghouse of XRP, and I think they're going to get involved as well. We need to grow the pie as an industry before we need to worry about carving out the pie. And teams like Algorand and Hedera and XRP are thinking about that kind of stuff right now. Not the tribalistic thing, but growing that pie so we all can be successful together.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite people in the crypto space, Lehman. I saw that interview with Brad and John Wood. We've interviewed John Wood a number of times on the channel. Great CTO for Algorand, somebody we're a big fan of. And you brought up an amazing point there. I think his words were something like, we're fighting over scraps at the moment. Why don't we get the pie first, and then we can sort of divide it up between us? Why don't we kind of all come together as an industry and try and work to get this where it needs to be before we start dividing it up and sort of splitting it up? And I think that was a great approach. I saw a comment, I'm going to ask you about this, about Ripple maybe becoming a governing council member. Have you heard anything about that?
That has not. I mean, we hear there's breadcrumbs that get out there that we hear about, and some of them actually come to fruition. A lot of them don't. I have not heard anything about XRP or Ripple joining the Hedera governing council, but it would make a lot of sense. We do have a couple entities within the Web3 space that are on the council. BitGo is one of the most recent. We have Chainlink on there as well. But yeah, it only makes sense to have one of the industries that's represented on the council be, the Web3 industry.
Yeah, I had to ask that. I've had multiple questions about it since obviously Lehman spoke with Brad. And you know what it's like. You know what the internet's like. Things can snowball. I just wondered if maybe you had heard anything through the grapevine, but nothing official on that as of yet. We'll hold our fingers crossed.
I will say that the XRP army and the HBARBarians out there, they're cut from the same cloth. They think really practically about solving real world problems. So I think it would be a partnership that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, one I'd certainly be excited about, that's for sure. I mean, I've been a long-term XRP holder and I guess speculator, and I think they've kind of stayed where they are because something's coming eventually, and to kind of bring both of them up at the same time would be amazing. Let's talk maybe about institutional adoption, because Hedera's kind of almost got built-in institutional adoption in regards to the node operators that consent the network for Hedera are institutions. And that's often, I think, a pain point for people when they think about, Bitcoin or something like that. They think maybe the people should run the nodes that govern the network or that kind of consent the network. Whereas Hedera, I think, introduced an entirely different paradigm to the crypto space. And it said, let's do this way, but have a kind of roadmap to eventually get it so that anybody, I believe, can run a node on Hedera. I don't know what the terminology for that is. Is it like public node or something?
So right now, as you alluded to, the council members run the nodes for Hedera. They're very methodical when they go through how they on their path to decentralization. So right now, the nodes are run by the council members. There are going to be community nodes run a little bit later on, maybe toward the end of this year. I would expect to start to see that. And that's going to be entities that are building in our space, are that wallet that I was talking about, Hashpack or Galaxy, professionals that are building on the network, but maybe not to the scale or size of the council members. I think they're going to be some of the first ones to run community nodes. And then eventually, yes, anybody's going to be able to run a node on Hedera. That's not those additional nodes aren't just, nice to haves. They are going to be critical because you're going to need 40 or 60 or 100 nodes per shard. And we are going to have to shard. We're going to have to break the network up and have those shards communicating to have that unlimited scaling. So it's not a nice to have. We're going to have those additional nodes at some point.
Yeah, and I think that's going to silence many people that kind of have maybe that disgruntled attitude towards the governing council and it being institutional. People will often say it's a misled comment that I always get saying, well, Hedera is centralized, and they just basically equate the fact that multiple institutions running something means it's centralized, whereas they've kind of fundamentally misunderstood what a distributed ledger actually even is to begin with. You could definitely argue that Hedera is a lot more decentralized geographically and also in regards to the hardware that it runs on compared to most. I mean, Ethereum, for example, 30% of all its nodes are on Amazon Web Services. Cardano, I think it's something like 25%. I think there's a rule that only 2 nodes can be on the same hardware. And is there a is there a kind of geographical line that's drawn in regards to where nodes can actually be situated?
Well, yeah, there's a couple points there. Like you said, there only can be only any given service. So, Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud or Amazon Web Services, only 2 nodes can run on any one of those things out of the council. Now, that's going to change a little bit once we move to, public nodes. But, there's a difference between practical governance or practical decentralization and, actually putting it into practice. When you have, there's going to be a consolidation of power when you have a lot of these other networks operating. For example, you have mining, companies or whatever it may be for Bitcoin. Certainly you can say that it is very decentralized. Let's not kid ourselves, but there is only 3 mining pools or 4 mining pools that have more than 50% of the mining power on Hedera. If for some reason those mining pools were to collude, there is the potential for a 51% attack or a 2/3 attack on Bitcoin. So with Hedera, that's not possible because I think it's a lot more difficult to get all of these different council members to collude because they're not going to jeopardize their brands that are worth billions, in some cases trillions of dollars, to do something nefarious when it comes to running a DLT technology like this. So there is that practical standpoint.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? When you look at Bitcoin, and there are definitely centralized points in regards to Bitcoin. You mentioned miners. We saw BlackRock enter the market, and they are now very quickly not only already the largest holder of most US mining stocks and actually further afield, but also becoming the largest holder of Bitcoin itself. And that may give them a bit of a sway in some way, shape, or form. So we could probably do a whole video on the governing council and the pros of it. But we have had thus far. So how many members are we at currently? 32 council members?
We just got 32. Yeah. So go on our way to 39.
On our way to 39. And is that going to be the limit for the time being?
It will be. So we first started adding council members in the beginning of 2019. That was the first crop. I think there was 5 council members that were initially announced. And then in September of 2019, we added 3 more. And then we've just been adding over time, and we're up to 32. The nice thing is the pace at which we're adding council members. We've already had 3 so far in 2024. We only have to have an additional 7 by the end of the year. Now, we don't always have to have a full council of 39 members. We're way past critical mass to effectively govern the network and have the proper expertise across all these different industries. But it's lining up pretty well. The first ones are going to be rolling off. They can serve up to 2 3-year terms, so 6 years. So the first ones are going to start to roll off in the beginning of next year. So there's a good chance we're going to fill out the council toward the end of this year and just kind of be rolling off at a regular pace and bringing on new council members fairly regularly.
Yeah, and I take it the council members, if they wanted to stay on, could do that.
After two, they can't. They would have to take a break for 1, and then they could come back and that's how it's set up right now. But the governing council can change things as needed. If they wanted somebody to stay on for longer, they certainly could. But just because they're rolling off doesn't mean they're going to stop building and continuing on with their applications.
Yeah, I had to ask that. I didn't actually know that myself in regards to the terms. That kind of makes sense, right? Just like the kind of political system, you maybe might want some fresher legs or to onboard more, I guess, council members to come up with their own use cases. And I think one of the requirements, we'll talk about the council members that we've had this year alone, 3 of them, Hitachi, Mondelez, who are the people behind Oreo and Toblerone, I know that for sure, and of course BitGo, which is interesting. But in regards to the governing council members that we currently have, I think one of the requirements was they all have to be looking to actively utilize or benefit Hedera itself. Right. Yeah.
That wasn't initially the case. You know, they were just trying to get these council members on board. But I think for at least 2 years now, they've wanted new council members to have use cases when they come on board. And we're seeing that. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a public use case where they're telling everybody about it, but they have to be actively pursuing and building on the network if they want to be a council member. And there's actually a fair amount of competition. We have a deep pipeline of council members that want to come on. But just as an example of, you know, some of the recent ones that have come on, Mondelez, you mentioned, they have Oreo and Chips Ahoy, and we can just go down the line, Cadbury, of different subsidiary companies that people will certainly recognize. They are working with a team called SKUX, and SKUX is a payments, and they facilitate promotions, so coupons. You can imagine the amount of coupons that Mondelez generates to get more engagement with their products. And that's exactly what they're doing. Right now, they're working on things like responsive promotions. So if you have a problem with a product or something like that, SKUX is going to allow you to go ahead and get your refund or something along those lines, but they're going to expand to be able to do all coupons. And I think that's going to accelerate fairly fast. I'm following SKUX really closely. We've seen them on with Lehman and who was it? One of the, either way, it was on NASDAQ, and they had a really good conversation, but that's a partnership that I think is going to grow fairly quickly. BitGo, which is the one that was just announced, they are, how many? They have, I think, over 200 exchanges. They also handle a fair amount of the custody solutions. So one of the ETFs for Bitcoin, they handle that. And then they want to also do a fair amount in tokenization. So real world asset tokenization. And, again, a perfect partnership for Hedera.
Yeah. I also know that BitGo is backed by Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley is actually an investor in BitGo, I believe, and Vanguard. I think it might be the Vanguard ETF.
I think Goldman Sachs, right? Yeah. Goldman Sachs is beyond. Yeah.
There's a few people involved with BitGo, and I take it, when we think about the tokenization of everything, someone's going to need to custody that. It's an interesting dilemma, isn't it? That if we all custody our own house ETFs, what happens when somebody hacks our wallet? Do they now own our house? Or and there's a need for a custodian, somebody like BitGo. Which is, I was very happy to see that on the governing council. I think the first one that we had this year was Hitachi, which
that's massive. Right. We haven't heard exactly what they're doing, but we know that it's probably going to be along the lines of Internet of Things, which we have a lot of exciting things going along those lines. But just going back to real world asset tokenization, BlackRock has already come up, and Larry Fink said, the future of financial markets is tokenization, and not just tokenization, but tokenization on public networks. So we're talking about networks like Hedera. And I think, we can certainly get into the retail aspect of DeFi, but I'm really impressed with DeFi as a proof of concept. It hasn't broken, on a large scale. There hasn't been really any major issues where you would think we would see more problems with that. So you're trading these tokens that are created with these networks, and we haven't had any major issues. That is a proof of concept for the traditional markets out there. And we're already starting to see things built on Hedera that is going in that direction. So one of the Hedera governing council members is Aberdeen, and Aberdeen started to tokenize one of their money market funds on Hedera just last year. And they're working with Archax over there in the UK to facilitate that more in the future. So we're going to see BitGo getting into that game as well. One of the things, and this is a smaller story on Hedera that you might not have heard too much, but something that really impressed me was the it's the digital commodities exchange. So this is an active traditional commodities market that's functioning right now and using Hedera to add trust. And they've already said that they're going to move to a DeFi model so that tokenizing these commodities contracts and allowing them to trade, just like you see right now with smart contracts and DeFi. You're going to see that move to the commodity markets, and then the larger markets out there, New York Stock Exchange and New York and Nasdaq and these FTSE. I mean, you can go down the line. They're going to say, well, how can this be done? And they're going to look at these smaller exchanges and how they're doing it, and they're going to find Hedera at the core of it. So we're really excited to see what's going to happen with real world asset tokenization on Hedera.
Yeah, you've also got, I believe, DLA Piper, one of the biggest law firms in the world. You know, I think they're in 40 plus countries. They are, is it Toko?
It is
They're
Toko,
looking to tokenize real world assets. So and this is the thing, going back to what we touched at the start of the video, we've only spoken about a few companies, a few of the governing council members, and that's just the governing council members that are looking to facilitate things and already doing it with Hedera, let alone all the other companies that aren't governing council members. And there are, I dare say, hundreds, probably, I don't know what the number would be, that are all looking and actively looking to do this. You can really see this beautiful picture being painted with Hedera from a technology point of view, from an adoption point of view, every which way, from a market point of view. Perhaps if you decide you want to speculate on the price of HBAR, which I know gets shunned a little bit because maybe it trivializes some of what's really going on, but I think a lot of people in the crypto space are here through the kind of for the speculation side of things. And I think with Web3, what I've always looked at is you're looking at the companies that are going to run tomorrow's world. And to touch on the point that you made at the start in regards to, you see Hedera kind of having a future role in many different areas. You know, I actually think Hedera stands a great chance of doing exactly that. Should we maybe dive into some companies that are actually not on the governing council that are utilizing Hedera? One of the really impressive ones, I think, is Karate Combat.
Absolutely. The retail side of it, I mean, Hedera, as I said before, they are focused in some ways on some of those enterprise applications, but a lot of the retail facing applications are doing fairly well too. And Karate Combat is a really interesting one. It's one of my favorites. So think of Karate Combat as a strike league. So think of it like MMA, like the UFC, but without grappling. The fights are amazing. I'm a huge fan of just MMA in general, and the knockout ratio is pretty crazy. But I mean, there's been ones where there's been 9 fights on the card, and 8 of them will be knockouts. It's just an exciting. It's a good product. The pit that they use compared to the cage that like UFC uses, that's kind of a gimmick. The pit that they use is really it's made for sport. But how Web3 gets put into this, they knew that they needed to find a way to create super fans, because the super fans really drive the entire league. Normally how that's done is with a lot of money. There's another MMA league out there called the PFL, and they have spent millions and millions of dollars trying to promote and compete with the UFC. Karate Combat looked at that and said, well, we can kind of, put a financial aspect to this using a crypto token. So what we'll do is we'll create a token. We will allow people to do something called up-only gaming. So you pick the fighters that you think are going to win, and if you win, you get more tokens. If you lose, you don't lose anything. So it's not normal gambling, but of course the token goes up and down in price, though there is ways to lose. This certainly isn't financial advice. But I've participated this for a while, and I'm also a big American football. I'm a huge fan of that. My team has been in the Super Bowl a few times, and I would have said before, that's the most exciting thing to be involved with. But we have this little strike league, and without a doubt, if you have a significant amount of karate and you're playing this up-only gaming, there's nothing more exciting than doing that. And I know that this strategy of creating super fans works, because I have become a super fan. I am digging into the fighters before the fights, and they are growing at this exponential rate. I think the first few fights, you can see it's just up and to the right and accelerating. The first few fights, it was like 1,500 people played, and then you had like 2,000 people played, and then 4,000, and then on up. They had a big event in December, and I want to say, and I'm guessing they had, like 11,000 people participate. The event after that, they had 27,000 people participate.
Wow.
The last one, they had 41,000 participate. And they have events coming up in Cancun and then Dubai, and then they're going to be in Austin in May. And that might trigger some people's heads, because what's going on in Austin in May? Yes, it's going on around consensus. So it's going to be one of the hottest tickets in town. One of the big things around those big crypto events is what's going on at night. And Karate Combat is probably going to be one of the hottest tickets in town. So the retail side, we can certainly go deeper down that. But you were talking about how we are, a lot of people will look at it and say, well, of course, they're on the Hedera Governing Council. Of course, they're building on Hedera. I don't know how much weight that carries, but there are other entities that are building that aren't associated with the council. So a great example is Hyundai, the car manufacturer. Of course, they're a lot more than just cars, but Hyundai is tracking all of their parts to track the carbon. That was actually done initially by Atom.io, but Hyundai has nothing to do with the governing council yet. Maybe they'll join later on, but they're doing the exact same thing, taking the lead of a prior Hedera governing council member and saying, you know what, that's a really good idea. We're going to do the same thing. Another example is Fresh Supply Co. And Fresh Supply Co. was using something called MasterCard Provenance. MasterCard Provenance was a private blockchain that was allowing people to, again, supply chain and payments and things like that. But MasterCard said, wait a second, this is not our core business. Running one of these decentralized networks is not easy. We need to outsource this. Now, it wasn't MasterCard that was making this decision, but MasterCard was looking at it and saying, okay, we need to sunset Provenance. This isn't for us. And I think that's what's happening across the board is these private blockchains are not working out. And they're saying, just like Larry Fink said, public networks are the way to go. Well, they had a lot of customers for MasterCard Provenance. One of them, the largest one, being Fresh Supply Co. Fresh Supply Co. is like, this is core to our business. We need to do this someplace else. And they said, Hedera is the way we're going to solve this. So they moved from MasterCard Provenance over to Hedera and then built all the tools so everyone else that's using MasterCard Provenance can do the exact same thing, even easier than Fresh Supply Co. did. And I don't think for a second MasterCard is looking at that and saying, okay, we put all these resources into creating MasterCard Provenance and then we sunset it and all of that business has shifted over to Hedera. I think that's probably putting up a flag in their head saying there's something here. There's something real being built here. So yeah, I mean, across the board, there's a lot of things that are being built that have nothing to do with the Hedera Governing Council or maybe are being led by the Governing Council, but are being, completed by other entities out there, really big companies in some cases like Hyundai.
Yeah, that was a brilliant example using Hyundai because they are they're of the kind of status that they could be a governing council member, but they're not, and they're still choosing to build on Hedera. And what you mentioned there in regards to MasterCard, this is Hedera is becoming an obvious choice, I think, very quickly, and the governing council being a big part of it isn't the be all and end all in regards to actual builders. And there's plenty of examples you mentioned too there. I'm sure there's many more that you could talk about. Are you seeing much of kind of a non-institutional ALK building on top of Hedera? Because I've been watching the kind of DeFi space for Hedera for a long time. I always keep track of TVL for many DeFi spaces. And I think just this year alone, Hedera's TVL in regards to DeFi has tripled, which is impressive. Are you seeing much kind of, let's call it DeFi, coming to the forefront of Hedera? And if so, what are some of the kind of projects that you're looking into?
Sure. Yeah. So these retail facing products are doing very well on Hedera because it's just easy to use. It doesn't matter if you're enterprise or retail. And I'm not so sure what's going to be more successful, these enterprise use cases or these, small teams that create something that then becomes a unicorn or a decacorn, becomes these huge companies in the future. But yes, our DeFi ecosystem, I remember several months ago, maybe 6 months ago, not that long ago, it's gone up as far as TVL 6x. Now, some of that is token movement, some of that is new tokens coming on board, but it has been impressive how that's changing. And that's in a lot of different areas. I mean, the DeFi in itself, just trading the tokens, but there's real things that are being built. Gaming is a big one. We have a team that is founded by former executives from PlayStation, so Lithos. They are building a AAA game. Now, that's going to take a while. They're trying to keep people engaged, but that will eventually come out. We have other teams like Legends of the Past that are building in the gaming space. Earthlings. I really like what Earthlings just did.
Yep.
Actually, I have their shirt on right now. And this is really fun. So a lot of the we hear about airdrops, and initially in the Hedera ecosystem, they were using NFTs. You get this NFT, and we'll do this airdrop. What Earthlings just started to do is HBAR weighted airdrops. They figured that the broadest measure of holders, or the broadest amount of holders within the Hedera ecosystem, of course, is HBAR holders. We want to reach all of those people with their token, and they have a lot of NFTs. They're building a gaming metaverse that, when you look, you can go to Earthlings Land on X, and you can look at some of the stuff that they're posting, and it's someplace that I would want to live. And that's exactly what I think you're going to need for these immersive environments. But getting back to my point, they said, we're going to do this HBAR weighted airdrop to try to get our in-game currency called Steam into people's wallets, and that's going to incentivize them to go and then participate in our game when it comes out. They already have some mini games coming out, but they're going to be broadening, making that, I think, probably by the end of the year, maybe next year, who knows when that's actually going to come to fruition. But they need to get that token out there. So they did this HBAR weighted airdrop. They had almost 400 million HBAR participate in it. 27,000 accounts associated it. It's pushing 40,000 accounts now. They did one, it was a small one, and then they're going to increase that over time. Now we have other teams that want to do that as well. We have a decentralized media platform, a promotion platform that just launched. They're looking at doing the same thing. We have meme coins that are looking at doing the same thing. So this is a whole nother way that we can value the HBAR holders that have been really integral in helping build out this network and giving value to the HBAR, which is the resource that a lot of the entities within Hedera use to build out both the infrastructure and then the ecosystem as well. All these different participants that are building. So yeah, I'm excited about what's going on in the retail space. We already talked about Karate Combat. That falls smack dab in the middle of the retail space. And the last one I kind of want to touch on is Galaxy. So that's a social media platform. It's a web application that anybody can get on their phone. You've seen them on NASDAQ now. You've seen them on CNBC. Solo, one of the founders, he's a founder also with one of the newest players to the Lakers, Spencer Dinwiddie. And they're trying to create this creators galaxy. The user interface is great. It's kind of similar to X, but a little bit different. I suggest everybody go try it. But they're trying to do things that we've been hoping would come to the crypto space for a long time, but really hasn't come to fruition. The latest thing that they did was you can send crypto on Galaxy as easily as a text. The promotion is still going on, so you should certainly try to check that out. But those are things that we talked about years ago, but are just starting to come to fruition now because of these retail applications. And I think Galaxy is a great example of one of those teams that can really compete with some of our large enterprises that are building on Hedera. They could be one of those unicorns or one of those decacorns in the future. And it's something you can get your hands on. That's the difference between this bull run for Hedera and last bull run. You can actually get your hands on these retail applications now and see how fast it works and all that kind of stuff to get a little bit better idea of how Hedera works and the benefits that it has.
Yeah, we'll leave links to the likes of Galaxy and Earthlings and things like that in the description for you guys to check out, because we really want to encourage people to go and actually use Hedera. You'll see just how amazing, easy it is to use when you actually start, certainly comparing it with other blockchains. Some blockchains you kind of need a PhD just to figure out how to get around, whereas with Hedera, it's kind of made very seamless. And it's amazing to hear you mention the participation that we saw in the Earthlings airdrop in regards to actual accounts, also in regards to Karate Combat and the kind of voting that we're seeing taking place. Because if you look at users on dApps, let's use Ethereum as an example, it's few and far between that have something like 10,000 active users. We're seeing some insane numbers on Hedera, and we've kind of really gone down and looked at a number of different areas where Hedera is being used, whether that be institutional, whether that be retail, whether that be gaming, whether that be real world applications. And these are just some of multiple different projects within these individual categories that kind of compile this, unbelievable use case. One of the things we always hear is that, okay, well, is anyone actually using this? Well, I mean, we've just given what, 12, 13, 15 something examples in a short interview, let alone all the others that are out there. And I think this is really building up an amazing picture in regards to Hedera, which is really what we're trying to do. You know, we're both big fans of it. I know you work with the HBAR, but you have the HBARBULL, which is separate, and you have your own views that are very separate from the HBAR Foundation.
Yeah,
Have
I
you got?
do some
Yeah, sorry.
community engagement and stuff with the HBAR Foundation, but I'm just wearing my HBAR Bull hat, just one of the Hedarians out there. I'm not representing the HBAR Foundation here today, just representing the HBAR Bull.
Yeah, and you know, knowing a little bit about yourself, you know, you've been in to Hedera and a real fan of the project way before anything with the sort of HBAR Foundation came about, which is, you know, you're a true fan like I am, I guess. Fan, is that the right word? I don't know. Maybe it is.
It has to be. It's
Admirer.
more than that. I mean, I've helped build, you know, applications on Hedera. When you get involved with this, you can't help but want to build on the network. It's a deep dive, and once you've gone down that rabbit hole, it's pretty hard getting out because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And a kind of on the sort of futuristic theme, you know, we spoke about maybe 10 years time, what's Hedera going to be doing? It's going to be doing lots of things, hopefully. There is this thing called the Internet of Things really coming to the forefront of the world that we live in. You know, right now we're communicating on the internet of kind of people or information. We are going to move to a world where machines are going to talk to one another through the Internet of Things, and blockchain has an amazing application there. You know, it's kind of, again, another missing piece to the puzzle. Is there anything you would highlight as an area that I'm really interested in? Also, DePin's another. I guess they're two of the same thing. Is there anything you would highlight in regards to Hedera and its ecosystem that is kind of pioneering the Internet of Things, or looking to facilitate some sort of an application utilizing distributed ledgers to facilitate the Internet of Things?
There's no question. The first one that pops into my mind is Neuron. So they're over there in the UK, and they're starting with drones, so aerial drones, adding trust to, you know, drones making deliveries and things like that. You can't have a drone flying around and not tracking it. So they're using the Hedera consensus service to track drones in that space, and they're getting a lot of traction already. They had just something that was announced. Milton Keynes, a fairly large city there in the UK, is using Neuron to track drones, mostly for medical deliveries. Of course, we're in pilot, you know, we've gotten past the proof of concept phase and we're getting to pilots at this point. And that's kind of what they're doing there. The way that Rob Allen, you're probably aware of who Rob Allen is. He's one of the Hedera Governing Council member representatives, in this case from AP Plus down in Australia. He said essentially what Neuron is helium on steroids. You know, helium's out there. They're on Solana now. They made that switch over. But I think Neuron is going to be a pretty healthy competitor. They're starting, you know, with that niche, and we have the likes of Google Wing paying attention to them and Amazon paying attention to them for, you know, drone deliveries. That's just the start, though. So the whole point of Neuron is you put all these sensors, kind of like Helium, out there that can track these drones. They can be facilitated or operated by individuals throughout the ecosystem. I think it's not just going to be individuals, which I know Helium is focused on, but an entity like Milton Keynes, a local jurisdiction, could do that, put out all of their own sensors, and, you know, because they want to have drone delivery. But once you have the sensors out there, you can use it for anything. So you could use it for autonomous vehicles or things like that, logging that critical information. And the beautiful thing that, again, the proof of concept was proven out by Helium, you can incentivize these people. You have to have those really small payments and be able to do that. You can't do that with the likes of PayPal. You have to have a super efficient DLT to be able to do that. And that's exactly what Neuron's going to do. They're going to launch a token on Hedera, and they're going to incentivize their community with payments in stable coins, so things like USDC, and then they're going to also incentivize using their own token. And this is how you can get entities that can be companies that could be running some of these sensors. It could be individuals. It could be, you know, local municipalities that are running these sensors because they want to take the Internet of Things in their local areas to the next level. So even though they're starting with drone deliveries, that's just the beginning because these sensors can be used for all kinds of things. There's some more things that I want to touch on DePin, but it crosses over into Refi as well, and we can get into that if we have time.
Absolutely.
But that's one of the things that Hedera is kind of special with is you'll have some of these networks that focus on one thing, supply chain or cross-border payments. Hedera is at or near best in class in every single one of these things. It might not be as high profile right now because it might be being built behind the scenes, but Hedera is attacking every single one of these verticals with a fair amount of vigor. So I'm excited to see what they do with DePin, and we can go down the line a little bit further on that if you'd like, but I want to take a little break and see if you have anything to interject.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's amazing. You need payments. I mean, I was just looking at, again, revisiting Drop, which of course was featured on the FedNow's website. When you look at them in terms of payments compared with like PayPal or some of your credit cards, it's an insane difference in terms of payments. It's something like, in some cases, 5 times cheaper to use Drop. That might even be an understatement. So this is the thing, again, we've just gone into another small, it's going to become an even bigger category in regards to the Internet of Things and Neuron, which are facilitating a Helium-esque kind of network. This is what the future looks like. And for Hedera to be at the forefront, Drop also uses Hedera. For Hedera to be at the forefront of so many different areas and be best in class at providing the services for these different areas, we've just got to get this content out there and tell people, look, there's this network here that can do all these things. We've mentioned, again, another partner or another not partner use case and application building with Hedera. There's so many, and this is only going to grow exponentially. And if you follow things like Metcalfe's law or anything like that, you know, the value of this network is huge already to become even bigger, I think.
Well, there's a big difference between price and value, right? And what we're talking about here with all the things that are being built are value. And that delta, the difference between the value that's being created and the price, that's the opportunity that's in front of us. But going down the line, I do want to talk a little bit about Drop. They were actually featured by FedNow. Yes, the Federal Reserve in the U.S. is operating FedNow, and they were featured by FedNow for offering these micropayments. And just one little tweak on what you were saying, the 5%, that's a flat fee for their micropayments. So where something like PayPal, as you come down in the amount of the payment, the chunk that they're taking is getting bigger. I think at $1, PayPal takes 51 cents, so 51%, where all the way down to 1 penny, Drop is just 5%. So it's just 1/20th of a penny down there at 1 cent. For apples to apples, you're only paying 5 cents for a $1 payment. So it does facilitate all kinds of things, and it's caught the attention of things like FedNow.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's go down that road that we want to go down in regards to DePin and kind of Realfi and all this kind of stuff. You know, what would you say is really at the forefront of your mind when we talk about Hedera in relation to these kind of areas? You know, what are things you want to highlight or maybe talk about broadly as it relates to Hedera and how it's kind of accomplishing things in these different jurisdictions?
Well, we've covered a lot. I mean,
yes,
we could certainly go on cross-border payments with what Shinhan was doing, but I think the thing that pops into my mind the most is Refi. So regenerative finance, it's things like sustainable energy and carbon credits. Huge shout out to the HBAR Foundation Sustainable Impact Fund, because they have built the infrastructure where Hedera is leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else in terms of building out that infrastructure. And you'd think like it just takes, you know, 1 or 2 teams to do something like this, but it's just not the case. They're building a completely new industry essentially in our Refi ecosystem. They call it the Guardian ecosystem because there's a token standard that's at the center of it, called the Guardian, but it can be used for all kinds of things. But what I'm starting to see now is in the Refi ecosystem, which is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar market. There's no question. It's you know, tens or hundreds of billions dollar of a billion-dollar market now, but it's going to be trillions of dollars. And I'm starting to see traction after we've built all this infrastructure, which has taken years. One of the Hedera governing council members is EDF. It's a French company, but it has been, and it might be now, the largest electricity producer in the world. So we're talking about a huge company here. And I suggest everybody go check out, it's dltearth.com/case-study/EDF. And it has 3 use cases that they are building with Hedera within our Refi ecosystem. One is green hydrogen certification and trading, so active markets on Hedera. And all 3 of these, I think, are past the proof of concept phase. These are in the pre-production pilot phase. The second one is around EV charging and renewable energy certificates, so those carbon credits that I mentioned before. And then looping back around to DePin is called the Hedge Project. And this one I just learned about, and it really jumped out to me because what Hedge stands for. Hedge is HED, which is the beginning of Hedera. G is for Google, and then the E is EDF. And the goal of this is creating a decentralized network for electrical meters, solar panels, and EV charging stations. So it's right, this is where the Refi ecosystem kind of dovetails into, the DePin, the decentralized physical infrastructure that we were talking about before. This is huge. I mean, we don't know how big this is going to get, but all the seeds are being laid. And once one entity like EDF does it, like we were talking about before in the traditional markets, all of the other entities around the world, all the other electricity producers are going to be looking to this as their own proof of concept of how they can do it themselves for microgrids and things along those lines. This is a sleeper. People are talking about DePin a lot. People are talking about gaming a lot, but people aren't talking a lot about Refi. And I'm not sure if that's because some of these other platforms aren't as dead set focused as Hedera is around it. It was a natural fit for Hedera being the most efficient network on earth. You can check out, there was a study done by the University College London that found Hedera was the most efficient. There was another independent study by, I think, the University of Singapore, don't quote me on that found the same thing. And we're talking about 2,000 times more efficient than centralized systems like Visa, and orders of magnitude more efficient than, other highly efficient, admittedly highly efficient networks out there we have in the DLT space. So Hedera was a natural fit for these kind of use cases, but that's definitely the sleeper that I'm keeping an eye on.
Wow, unbelievable. One of the largest electricity producers in the world utilizing Hedera. There's also, you mentioned crossovers there with Google and DePin and sort of Refi. This is, again, there's so much going on. And if you look at the connections and the kind of coalitions that Hedera already has, it for me puts her at the forefront of this entire industry. And you mentioned it's the most efficient network. Well, it's also one of the cheapest, one of the most secure, one of the most scalable. I mean, where do we stop here? At what point do we kind of go,
Well, you're bringing up a fantastic point. Regardless of what the fees they decide to charge are for all these different services, the freedom for them to change what their fees are or bring their fees down is always going to be 100% dependent on the efficiency of the network. That's the floor. So if Hedera is the most efficient network, they have the capability of having the lowest fees across the board. So that's one thing that I think is lost, regardless of, there are networks out there that decide to charge no fees. Now, of course, that's not sustainable. You can't get a free lunch, but it's important to know that efficiency goes beyond, so it goes beyond just the environmental efficiency. It gets down to dollars and cents. The more efficient your network is, the lower your fees can be. And the governing council is going to have the freedom to change those fees as needed to meet whatever the market demands are that are out there.
Dive into Shinhan Bank as a closer. We'll give one more because, like I say, I think we've covered. I mean, how can you not be excited? If you've been following,
I'd love to get into the crypto market as well. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we could keep going down the rabbit holes. Shinhan Bank, I mean, cross-border payments. We know there's networks that are completely focused on cross-border payments. They've done 2. They did a proof of concept, we'll call it, or a pilot with Shinhan Bank is the oldest financial institution in South Korea. They did a cross-border payments proof of concept with the largest bank by assets in Africa. And then they went and brought entities that aren't on the Hedera Governing Council, the largest financial institution in Thailand, and they did cross-border payments with them. So a second proof of concept. And again, that's getting past the proof of concept phase. It's more of a pre-production pilot that they were doing. And they were doing FX as well. So at the same time, they weren't just transferring payments, but they were doing it across different currencies. So that was certainly exciting.
Yeah, I think there's a link also with the Bank of Ghana somewhere, I believe.
There is. Jewel Bank was involved.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go down the line. There was a lot of different entities that were involved with that. And they aren't doing this for fun, right? Just as a proof of concept anymore. They're doing this because they want to bring it to production. So I think Hedera is going to be a good competitor in that cross-border payments and remittance market.
Unbelievable. You see, like, this is what I mean. You know, there's just so much that we can talk about, so many different areas, whether it be Internet of Things, DePin, finance, you know, identity, gaming, whatever it may be, DeFi. Hedera's got them all covered, and it's doing them kind of more efficiently than kind of any other blockchain or kind of company out there currently is. Let's maybe finish on your thoughts on the markets. So let's put Brandon in the hot seat here. What do you think about the markets? Do you think we're in a bull market, for example? You know, do you think this is a positive time to be in the crypto space as maybe an investor? Of course, nothing we say or do is financial advice. This is just me asking you your opinion as someone whose opinion I value. What do you think about the markets right now?
Well, I mean, it's hard to look at this and not think that we are entering a crypto bull market. The last one we had, and each one has kind of its own narrative. The last one we had, you know, 2020 going to 2021, we started to have institutions and companies getting involved. So we had Tesla buying Bitcoin and MicroStrategies and PayPal all kind of getting involved. And initially in these bull markets, you'll see Bitcoin starting to take off. So that second half of 2020, Bitcoin rose, you know, about 100% from 10,000, give or take, up to about 20,000. During that time, altcoins certainly don't perform as well as Bitcoin. And we actually saw during that time HBAR fall. Now, at the time, HBAR fell from about like 3.4 cents, and it fell down to like 2.8 cents. So as Bitcoin was rising, you actually saw HBAR falling. Well, that in December, you saw Bitcoin pass its all-time high. And of course, we may not repeat, but it may rhyme, who knows. The following 3 months, HBAR did a 15x compared to Bitcoin only doing a 3x. So these altcoins, which have been keeping up fairly well, I've been impressed with how the altcoins have performed during this time when Bitcoin has bumped up against and broken through its previous all-time high. I think it's happening faster because of the ETFs, right? Those capital flows have exceeded everyone's expectations. And I think I've heard a fair amount of people talk about how, well, those are just people that are getting involved with the Bitcoin ETF. What does that have to do with the altcoin market? But we have to think about capital flows in that instance. So who is getting that capital? So we're getting a lot of new buyers coming in and buying these Bitcoin ETFs. Well, those are previous Bitcoin. The only place that those ETFs are getting the Bitcoin are from people that were holding Bitcoin before. So now these are our native crypto holders who know that we're potentially going into a bull run that want to get exposure again. So if we have a Bitcoin dip, they may buy back into Bitcoin, but they're also going to look at the rest of the crypto landscape. So they're looking at all of the other altcoins out there and saying, well, which ones do I believe in? So right now, those are people that already had their favorite coins. Right. So if they already liked HBAR, they may buy into it. And we've seen HBAR rise along with a lot of other coins. But what I think will be interesting, the most interesting part, the most exciting part of bull markets are the latter part, right? When you start to bring a bunch of new entrants into the space. And I think some of those people are going to be the ones that are buying the ETF for the first time. They're like, hey, this is done really well. Well, what else is out there in the landscape? And they're going to be looking at altcoins just like last time. It's not going to be any different because one of the big drivers is the ETFs. So they're going to be looking at everything out, and it's all about narratives. and they're going to say, what resonates with me? A lot of those are going to be more mature because they're buying the ETFs and they haven't gotten involved before. And I think that Hedera has that narrative that is going to resonate with a lot of new people if we do continue on with this bull run. They're going to look at the Hedera Governing Council. They're going to be impressed with that. All of the use cases that we talked about, they're going to be impressed with that. They could be impressed with the fact that we're processing more than all of the other top networks combined in terms of transaction throughput. There's only one at the top there, and Hedera is proving that we can do that. So all of these things combined create an enticing narrative for new entrants. And those new entrants, if we are in a bull market, are certainly going to make things interesting as we go forward. So even though people are, I think those native crypto users are the ones that are driving the market right now, and they already had their favorite coins. I think Hedera and HBAR are well positioned as we go into the next phases of the bull market.
Oh, I think unbelievably so. I really do. And you're very right on kind of how Bitcoin dominance plays out at the start of a bull and then how it kind of wanes off. And narrative's a big thing. You know, this is the first time we put in a new all-time high pre-halvening in the dollar. And that has everything to do with the spot ETFs. This is all happening before the supply of Bitcoin has been cut in half. You know, it kind of paints this really good fundamental narrative for Bitcoin, which is really still the tide that rises and sinks all ships. And also we've got an Ethereum ETF in question, which is the things we're looking at technically are Ethereum BTC chart and Ethereum dominance chart. They're both set up for upside and explosive upside, which the fundamental narrative of that will be an Ethereum ETF. Mark my words on that. I'm almost 100% sure that you will get an ETF. Let's say 99% sure, so we can leave that 1% for being wrong. But there's no way that Hedera isn't going to benefit in what is going to be a good time in the markets. You know, and technically we gave a price prediction. I'm always very skeptical on doing price predictions of about 27 cents that we think will get hit likely by the first half of this year. So time's are ticking. And then we might be looking at maybe a $2 price prediction, depending on what we do at that kind of 26, 27 cents mark. If it does act as a key level of significance and we maybe set up a broader technical structure like what we've got for Bitcoin, to look to get to maybe $2. I mean, that would be phenomenal. Doesn't have to get there. You know, this is speculation on my behalf totally, but technically done. I think we very much agree that, you know, it's a good time ahead of us. Fundamentally, Hedera looks fantastic. From a price point of view, I think it looks amazing. It's just the complete package, and it's always such an honor to have you on and talk to you and sort of pick your brains as a wealth of knowledge on all of this. Brandon, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. I am going to wrap the video up there. You know, there's so much for people to, and go and rewatch this. If you've just watched it the first time, I guarantee you're going to miss out some of what's been said here because there's just so much. It's been a learning experience for me. I'm sure it's been a learning experience for the viewers. Brandon, it's been a pleasure. Have you got any sort of closing remarks?
Well, the pleasure has absolutely been mine. I would say the one thing, you know, you can listen to talking heads on YouTube all day about crypto, but don't trust me. I think that's one of the things that Hedera, it attracts a certain type of people. It's people that like to dig. So all of the things that I talked about today, go and look up those things on your own. Go and do your own research. Dig into EDF. Dig into what Shinhan is doing, and Hyundai, and Mondelez, and SKUX, and Karate Combat. Go and do your own research, and I think you'll find that there's a lot of hype in the crypto space. This is all substance. So that's what I would suggest in closing is go do your own research, dig into all the things that I talked about, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yep, we're going to leave links to Brandon's channel. The HBARBULL will also go and leave links to Twitter. We'll leave links to some of what's been spoken about and where you can find that in the description. So do make sure you check out the description to find links. And of course, absolutely go and give Brandon a follow and definitely subscribe to his YouTube. It's my go-to when it comes to information involving the Hedera Hashgraph, the HBAR ecosystem. Brandon, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And I look forward to doing this again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.